Hey guys, welcome to the channel. Quinn here with Valhalla Outfitter. These guns are both empty. The store is open, so if you're looking for gear and you'd like personalized professional advice, feel free to reach out. You can check out the store at shop.valhallaoutfitter.com. Today we're going to talk a little bit about the practical differences between a shorter barrel rifle and a rifle that is set up for longer distance shooting. The front here is the Browning X-Bolt Mountian Pro 6.5 PRC long range. And then back here we've got the X-Bolt Mountian Pro SPR for suppressor ready. This is in 6.5 Creedmoor, so it has an 18-inch barrel. I thought it might be helpful for you to see what they look like next to each other to get a real practical appreciation for the size difference between them. Obviously, this barrel is shorter. This is wearing the recoil hog muzzle brake, which probably adds another 1.5 inches. The long range variety has a 26-inch barrel, I believe, and the SPR version has an 18-inch barrel, which means when I add a can to this that's 7 inches, it gets me right to about 25 inches, which is in line with kind of the standard traditional deer rifle that's around, call it a 24-inch barrel. The idea here is that the SPR I use for 500 yards and in, and then I use the long range for 500 yards and out. In terms of maneuverability, the difference is vast. For being in the woods or in maybe a confined deer blind where you have more than one shooting window and you need to be able to move that rifle around, the shorter carbine style rifle is super handy for that. The trade-off is velocity, right? You lose about 30 feet per second per inch. So if you're shooting a Creedmoor at 2800 FPS at 24 inches, you're losing about 180 FPS. It's going to get you down to probably 25 and change. The 6.5 PRC, to maximize the ability for that cartridge to burn all the substantial powder that's in there, the longer barrel gets that velocity up there, and this gun's shooting closer to 3,000 FPS. Other than the maneuverability, the biggest difference is the weight. The long-range version costs you about 1 pound and 11 ounces, and part of that is due to the fact that the barrel on the long-range version is heavier than it is on the SPR. It's not quite as heavy as maybe a varmint barrel, but it's in between a sporter and a varmint barrel, and it certainly does add some weight. Really, it's use case. If I am going to be set up for long distance shots where I don't have to hike miles and miles and miles and miles, I'll take the LR version. Also, it's still not an incredibly heavy gun. I think it's 7 pounds and 11 ounces. You add a scope on there if you can keep it manageable. This is a Vortex LHT at 20 ounces or so. So I'm at 711. That gets me to 8 pounds. I'm just about a 9-pound gun, all in, with this one, right? Subtract a couple pounds for that, and I'm closer to 7 pounds. It's much more comfortable to carry. For me, I found that my accuracy is better with the heavier gun. It is just easier to get those crosshairs to settle down and rest on target. And we'll move to the computer so I can show you the groups to kind of illustrate what I'm talking about. The other thing is, and maybe this was just in my head, was that the shorter barrel, once you add the can on there, the can's kind of big and the barrel is smaller. And if I'm in an environment where it's windy or there are wind gusts, I found that the wind had a tendency to push that suppressor around just a little bit, just enough that I could notice that there was a little bit more jiggle, and you don't have that with the long-range model. Which one's better? Well, neither one, really. It depends on your use case. If you're going to be going through the woods and you don't care about shooting suppressed, this SPR is a super handy gun. Anything down in the 18 to 20-inch range, particularly if you want to shoot suppressed, these shorter barrels make it so that with your suppressor on there, it's not like you're carrying a cue stick through the woods. The long-range version, I wouldn't probably shoot. I'd shoot it from a deer blind if I had one shooting lane. But if I had more than one shooting window, I wouldn't want to have to move it around. And secondly, I would probably never shoot this thing suppressed unless we were prone or in a fixed position and we're shooting long range targets. Then maybe I would. But generally my preference is to shoot the PRC with the brake, shoot the Creedmoor with the suppressor, and it still gets me into a pretty manageable size. This holds true for these Browning rifles, but probably these ideas would hold true regardless of the make or model. Just a point of comparison when you're evaluating how long of a barrel you want to carry around. Really just depends on the use case in both cases, and also remember there's a weight penalty to pay with the heavier barrel, the longer barrel, but it does provide some advantages. We'll cut over to the computer desk so I can show you the groups we're getting. It'll give you an idea of how accurate these Brownings are out of the box, and also illustrate kind of what I was talking about in terms of moving the barrel around. The other thing, and I haven't fully researched this yet, but I am curious to know if the longer sight radius provided by the longer barrel means that the muzzle is less prone to movement based on micro movements back here by the action. It just seems to me that this, when it's on high magnification, the shorter barrel tends to want to dance around a little bit, but that could also be a product of the weight and the difference in the balance points that comes about due to having that longer, heavier barrel. Both are great guns. These particular models are great, and depending on your use case, there is no best answer in general between short barrel, long barrel. It really depends on your use case and how you're going to get the most utility out of your equipment in the field to accomplish your objectives. We'll take a look at the computer, talk about those groups. Hope you guys learned something today, a little bit anyway, about short barrel, long barrel, kind of the sporter versus that heavier contour, and what it can do for you and what the penalty is you have to pay to have that heavier setup. Talk to you at the computer. See you real soon. Bye. Just to give you a practical illustration of what we're talking about in terms of those barrels and the accuracy, at least that I'm getting. This is the Mountain Pro 6.5 PRC long range, sighting in at 100 yards. When I print these targets out, they are 1/2 inch squares. This was the first group, 3 shots downrange. As you can see, no problem. Uber tight grouping. We're under a 1/2 inch MOA. Super pleased with this. The rifle is obviously a tack driver if I do my part. Again, not much to complain about here. And if I were a little better, I think that would even be tighter. Make one adjustment to the scope, and here's the next one that comes out. Again, we're approaching 0.4, actually sub 0.4 MOA accuracy. Stack 2 bullets on top of each other. One's just a little bit out. Obviously, it looks like I need to go 1 click up, and this thing's good. Browning X-Bolt Mountain Pro, long range, out of the box accuracy, at least for this example, is incredible. Now we look at what happens with the short barrel, shooting suppressed, identical day, so same conditions, with the suppressor on. Here's the first 2 shots that I send. Stacking the bullets on top of each other. So if I do my part, that gun is accurate. Once I sent 2 and I could tell that I was obviously left, I decided to take a break and make an adjustment. Now this is where I really noticed, again, these are 1/2 inch squares. It was difficult for me to settle those crosshairs as calmly and as smoothly as I did with the long range. That could be partly a product of increased barrel length and the weight. The extra 1.11 pounds of that long range gun, particularly given that a lot of that weight is in the barrel because it's got a thicker barrel profile, it was more difficult for me to get those crosshairs to settle dead on and not move. I would also say, as I mentioned previously, that it was a pretty windy day, and I think that the wind may have been actually pushing the barrel around a little bit because the silencer is a little bit blocky. So this is the Mountain Pro 6.5 PRC, or pardon me, 6.5 Creedmoor at 100 yards, and we're turning in sub-MOA groups, 0.65 MOA out of the box. You know, pretty happy with it for a 500 yards and in hunting rifle. I think it's going to do the job. I then shot a group of 7, and I think this really illustrates kind of my point about those jumping crosshairs, right? 1.55 MOA group. I think the gun, especially evidenced by the fact those first 2 that I sent down range were literally stacking bullets, and then the next one was a sub-MOA group. It's maybe a function of both the barrel length and the weight. Maybe it was me. It could have been a combination thereof. It was windy. It does, out of the barrel, that extra muzzle velocity may have helped that PRC buck the wind a little more. It was gusty, so that could have played a small factor, but at 100 yards, I don't think it should play a huge factor. But in any case, 7 shots, 1.5 MOA roughly. Not terrible results, but not as good as what I would expect or what I think I'm capable of shooting. However, if we exclude the 3, like the 12 o'clock, 5 o'clock, and call that 8 o'clock rounds that are clearly outside of the group, and the reason I would do this is for zeroing purposes, because it certainly looks like those 4 that are clustered together are more representative of what the gun was actually doing. Then we get this sub-MOA group about 0.64 inches. The reason I do it this way is if I say these other 3 are likely out because of me or those environmental variables, then when I'm adjusting my scope to get on 0, I use what appears to be the most true clustered group, so I know that basically I got to go left a couple and maybe down 1, right? However, for a hunting rifle, exceptional quality. I think the gun is capable of more. I just have to get better at zeroing or keeping the crosshairs dead center and not moving them. And in my personal experience, it's easier to do with that longer, heavier barrel. The downside of that is when I'm in the woods, I don't want to carry the longer, heavier barrel. And when I am in a deer blind, the longer, heavier barrel also makes it much more difficult to take advantage of multiple shooting windows, multiple shooting lanes in a quick and efficient fashion. So the long range gun is like out west when I'm at range, 500 plus. I still want to maybe be able to shoot something like an Aoudad, so I need some knockdown power. That is typically the use case. Maybe on coyote sets when I'm out there, when I'm hunting more wooded areas where the shots I know are going to be under 500 and maneuverability is paramount, that's when I opt for the shorter barrel. So I don't know if there's an answer to the question of which one is better. They both have appropriate use cases, and I think, at least in the case of the Browning X-Bolt Pros, they're both super capable firearms. Hope this helped you guys a little bit as you think through barrel length and your equipment. Again, you can always check us out at shop.valhallaoutfitter.com. Thank you so much for stopping by, and we will see you on the trail. Bye-bye.